Yeah.
No, we're not gonna record it. Come on.
You better record it, Gary's not in.
You can do that if you want. Hey, Rebecca.
Well, how you doing? Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how you doing?
Fine, thanks.
Oh, it's by video, it's on video.
So. One more minute, see if anyone will turn. Oh. I do have the plans here, and I can share my screen when I get a chance, so we can kind of walk through them.
Okay.
Rebecca,
Great. Sounds good.
see if anyone else. Just for prosperity, we just sign in.
John Hancock?
John
Good
Hancock.
enough.
Paul over here. who has signed. Let's see. Just because he had the biggest temperature doesn't. That's why also John Hancock, because it's like, takes a few sections of paper.
And he was using a flare rather than a pen.
Yeah, he could have. He made his presence known.
You know what? If I was any better, I'd use them.
He's on paper training came down right now.
Yes, right.
I know. The one time you get to go away on a training on the Cape, it's raining. Isn't that great?
Isn't that been all this summer?
The
It's
accountant
raining more often than
and
not.
the treasurer were there like the week before and the week before that. They both had.
They had nice sunny days.
Yeah.
My room couldn't have been any further away from
Everything?
where I had to walk in the rain.
Oh, that's.
So,
Where was it? Falmouth or, Yarmouth?
yeah,
Red Jacket?
yeah.
Yeah.
That's always the place.
Or where would you, over in the back parking lot?
No, it was actually near the water, near the big tent thing.
Oh, you were down right by the beach?
Yeah,
Oh, that's,
but it was like a long walk outside.
Oh, you had to walk
in the heavy
around.
rain.
yeah,
There's no covering to get you there.
no internal corridors.
Yeah, I don't know.
Place is old.
Huh?
Place has been there quite a while.
Yeah, but they were talking about, you know, all the Massachusetts groups go there and they saying, oh yeah, the assessors, no, they didn't go there this year because of something.
We haven't been
blah, blah, blah."
there 2 years now.
Yeah, well, he said COVID, but then I said this year, you guys weren't sure or something, but
Yeah, we've been going there for like 25 or 30 years.
yeah.
They're in June, Amherst in August, Mass.
So we're just signing in, but Rebecca, without anyone else popping in, we can at least start. So let me share my screen. Oh, Mr. Terry Edwards.
You talked to Terry last week. He said he was
Sure.
stop in if he could.
Certainly. Sure. Hello, Terry, can you hear us? You're on mute. Maybe not. Shannon, can you hear us?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, just want to make sure. Just waiting for some sign-ins to go on. But since we have some people in, I do just, start off by saying, I want to say about a year ago, the Civic Association came and wanted to look at putting some pads down for part of their pavilion that they're raising funds for. The board at the time suggested that we look at the park holistically as part of where we're gonna put the pads to make sure that it works, not just for now, but for the future, and as well as making sure things can proceed with any sort of other future expansions if the board looks at it and figures out what they want to do. So we looked at hiring a landscape architect, and we came across Rebecca Bashard, who has been working with us on a few different variations. And we've been sitting with Civic Association, DPW, Board of Selectmen, myself, to just try to get a broad sense of something that we might be able to do and how it might end up looking. And so through all those different variations, we kind of came down with two different designs, but even though they're very similar in nature. Part of it is also to review to make sure that there's any future expansion allows us to meet ADA requirements in terms of traffic and being able to make sure that we can improve upon the use of it, not just for this event, but for other events that we would hold, and some possible different events. I know Park and Recs talked about maybe having something there on occasion. If we have it accessible, we might be able to do more things with the COA. So there's a lot of possibilities to expand the park, and not to get into the long history of it. We bought it so many years ago, and I think we haven't done, I don't think, a thing to it in terms of improvements, I think, outside of the use that you guys have done.
Well, not since Terry made it a park back about 15.
Yeah, and I think the only other improvement was the pathway that Gordon Jr., I mean, I don't think he's a junior, but
Yeah.
did with the Eagle Scout in terms of that.
Terry came back and put the lampposts, and I mean, that was
Yeah.
big. Really made it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
lit the place up.
Mhm.
Beautiful.
And so now, with that in mind, that was a while ago, right? The
Lights.
lamps. 2 years.
Nine people you were here? Well, we were hoping for them for 2013 for the 125th, and they showed up like a couple years later, maybe in 2015.
Didn't they come in with the wrong top or something?
I don't know. It was
So-
Delayed it.
But they've been in about 5 or 6 years, and then they updated that last one. 2
So-
years
That
ago.
was when it got to be.
And then part of they also did was, we put in the fountain, and then they did fundraising for bricks and stuff like that. Part of this design will be to, and I'll let Rebecca go over some of it, is to make sure that it's accessible, because it is a sloped area. And certain things to make it accessible, we would do some grading. And so Rebecca, can you see the screen? Okay.
Yes, sorry. Muted.
So part of this is that the Civic Association wanted a pad for the band pavilion that would be, we talked about different locations, but we landed on pretty much somewhat in the same area that it was before, but we just pushed it back and angled it a little bit more, just so there's a lot of dead space back there, and we can, as much room as we can get to the back allows more in the front. The other part of it was to look at the current gazebo that's there and how we can reallocate that for other use. I know, people use it for photos, for different events. And we talked again about putting it in different places in the park. And, we kind of settled on this back area here that would go in a little bit into the current tree line. You can see where the red is. That's where there's current trees. But I mean, I wouldn't call them trees, they're more bushes. And then this other pad that is here, and this is option 1 or 5A, I think we called it. This would be a larger pad, and that would be something that's left open. We could put different things during the year, but a lot of that use would be predicated on the winter carnival that the Civic Association puts on, and they have I think it's 20 by 40 tent.
Yeah.
And so this would allocate a space that the ground could be cemented and not have certain issues we've had with rain when it gets wet and then it becomes a muddy little area. And then during the other 11 months, we can take it down, we can put tables or other things, that could be up to discussion on, I talked about where you just mentioned that it could be painted a certain way, so you can do chess on it, checkers or something like that, do human, like the bigger size ones you've seen in some of the bigger parks. So all those type of things, as long as it's kind of a certain size, we can, maintain it for that. Then it comes down to a lot of the part that Rebecca did in terms of just grading and coming up with pathways to better enhance the park in terms of being able to walk across the park itself. So a lot of it was, and I don't know if the next one will do it, let me just check. No page I just passed. Yeah, so this is the one I want. So here you can see some of the different things that would be part of the improvements. One is you can see at the main entrance where it says 24 feet. Right now, I think it's about 16 to 17, might be even 18. What that will do is allow 2 cars in, 1 car in, 1 car out, have 2-way traffic, where if you go now, and you're trying to leave and someone's coming in, it's a how do you do, nice to meet you type of situation. Also allows if you see here, the 24-foot path, so you have in and out access through this area. And this expands the parking quite a bit. I think this is where it currently is. This would allow us to expand a little further. It's pretty flat. And then these yellow pathways are the accessible pathways throughout the park, so you can reach all the different events, as I think they call them. And then this pathway here would also be allowed for walking. The water fountain would be constructed so that it's level and accessible through the walking trails that are there. And then this would be an 18-foot wide path that would be stone dust level so that it's accessible, but also for people who are coming to the events would not push too far into this, so you could still have level seating areas. Well, here's the lawn parking. It's just in the design for now, so just so people can see. Not like anything has to be done, but at least it shows it's there. I believe there's a total of 35 parking spaces once everything's done, which will allow us, again, for parking here for pretty decent sized events that we would have on occasion. And then this is the path here. So you can see here, this is the trees that are here. These are the bushes that are marked out. Anything that's an X here would be a tree or something that would have to come down for it. Just go through. Again, similar drawing. The main issue there is just to show the slopes and the different parking. Then let me see. So that's option 5A. Let me see if I can find.
Greg, all the yellow paths there, they all going to be like, well, the idea is to all be hard top so that they're accessible for handicap wheelchairs or
So-
anything like that.
That is something that, Rebecca, if you want to take while I get the other one open.
Sure. The intent is that when everything is constructed, the entire park will be fully accessible. So the material could be a couple of different options. It could be asphalt or cement concrete pavement, but it could also be stabilized stone dust, which is similar to what you have out there now. As long as it's firm, stable, and slip resistant. We're really concerned mostly with the slopes and cross slopes of the pathways. We just rendered them in different colors so you could more easily see like the widths of wanting 5 feet minimum for a sidewalk or a pathway versus having the 18 feet minimum for vehicular traffic. So that's the gray is where we intend, you could have the option of having vehicular traffic. Obviously the parking lot, you would want 2-way car access, but then, we started looking at if you had a food truck event or an emergency need to get cars elsewhere in the park, widening out that main path that's there now. We did make that a bit wider than existing, and we made sure that that was a walkable under 5% slope as well, so it's fully accessible without any handrails.
And there'd be bollards there, so the cars couldn't just drive through before non-event. It'll be blocked off so that people could still walk without fear of car coming through. But if you have an event, you want to load and unload stuff, you can undo them and have people come up, or have people come in and be able to access it when they need to. So that way you're able to do that. And then this would still be the main entrance to the park. Like I said, we'd have bollards here so people couldn't just come in here and drive around. But you would have the bollards to protect those walking in the park.
Yeah.
You know, the main difference, if you see, is one pad is more, one is, it's just turned 90 degrees. One is that way, and I think the other one shows.
Right. I think the one you're showing now is how the tent they've been using opens, like the short end.
Yeah, this is
opens.
this is how it's been kind of popped up before, with the entrance to the front, going the long way. Again, the main difference with some of these are really just the two different options are whichever layout for the big tent. One there. So pretty much everything else, I mean, stays the same. Here's the difference. What you'll see is this keeps the tree that it's right here. That is an older tree that has that birch. The other, if it's going this way, that would be removed. I did talk to the arborist. You're supposed to give me a report. He hasn't yet. He mentioned that these trees here, there are, you know, those aren't anything particularly worth saving. The birch, he did say, is in good health. If you got rid of the other stuff, the birch could survive. But the birch is already at its, I want to say, end of life type of time frame in terms of when a birch normally.
It's a senior.
It's a senior. And because of that, you couldn't say in 5 years it's going to be still be there, or 3 years it's going to be there. Because it's already exceeded or at its life expectancy for a birch. They're not long lasting trees. So he would have no issue if the decision was made to remove it because of that instance. It's not something he can guarantee it's going to be there in another 10 years. Where if it was an oak or something, he would have a different story. And then just so you see here, I know we talked about these are the hemlocks that are back there. All those three trees are disease. He said he doesn't even recommend planting those anymore in the state of Massachusetts because of the disease that's afflicting them right now, and they're hard to starve off the disease, and they're putting, you know, spraying it every year, and whether it's kind of make it survive is 50-50 still. So those are, again, not something he would recommend worrying about saving.
So those trees would come out and something else would go in.
We could put something else in the back, and we can definitely plan on that once we get this location and figure out what's best for that, you know, soil shade location. I'm sure we can, an arborist or someone can come up with a planting design. So it really comes down to what type of pad we want and how it would look. The other thing, Rebecca, and I know you could probably speak about this better, we picked these locations strictly for the fact that if we were going to just pour the pads now with no grading or no prep work to it, those would be the only locations it could go and meet later on to be great, accessible with the grade. If we did prep work and regraded that area, in this area, once we cut down that tree or not and try to fit it in there, if we grade now, we can move it over a little bit here and there, we can play with it. It's really just because of the slopes now that if you're gonna pour a pad, you're gonna have to regrade everything now before you put a pad. Is that what Rebecca, that's correct, right?
Yes, that sums it up pretty well. I think one of the concerns we had was like if we tried to move this layout to the left of the plan, you see that red line, my little, if you can see my little mouse. But this line around there, thanks, Greg. That line is our highest contour. So the existing grade there is about 10 feet higher than the entrance at the street. So to get up to that point, to create an accessible route, we just can't make that happen if we leave the grades as is. So if you just wanted to go out there and build a pad on existing grade, we'd have to actually install some sort of ramp, a temporary ramp to get up there. If you were in a wheelchair or, even just to try to get a stroller up there, it would be like an effort to get up that steep driveway pathway that's there now.
Mhm. And so on this one, I'll just go down to this. And so again, you'll see kind of the pathway here, again, same parking. We'll do some clearing here for the pad that's back here. It's really not much back there. And so prior to coming to the board, we just wanted to sit down and see if there's any other public input on something now. I know you guys have been working on it for quite a bit. The Avon Civic Association is fundraising for the pavilion. I believe the pads have been mentioned that would be in-kind donation for the cement pads for the town and for the Civic Association to get those up and running. So prior to the board approving this and getting everything kind of lined up, they wanted to see if there's any public input on anything. So I just open it to any questions. I know right now, the idea for anyone who's out there is looking is that we're not looking to do this whole project in one swoop. This is really just to get civic associations kind of lay the land for get their pads in and then have us work with our open space and rec plan that we're working on to get that finalized, to get other funding sources that could be available to help do this with the trail program, the park grant. It was just awarded to a couple different communities out there. So there's a good amount of funding available once we get our open space and rec plan. Trail funding, I mean, I think it's up to like $100,000. So you can do a lot of grading, a lot of pathways for that. So the idea would be to get this kind of finalized, then work with our open space and get that finalized, and then we can, in the next year or so, get the groundwork for grant funding and all the work that we could do in-house with our DPWs, because there could be some grading and some pathways that we could help work on in-house to do so. And a lot of it, like I said, we would predicate it on funding available. Once it becomes in.
I mean, if there's funds down the road, I mean, if we have a plan in place, they always talk about shovel-ready stuff. So
Yep.
I think would be to the town's advantage to have, a finalized plan, no definite date on when things were going to start and finish, but would be ready to jump on it if and when the funds became available.
Definitely. I mean, I think it's a lot of, I looked at the town of Mansfield, they got their park grant recently and they had the whole fanatics drawn up for their playground. So, and that was a big push for them to get like $100,000 for them. So having the drawing set up and all the work that we can do in-house prior to, as well as getting the other stuff taken care of through the donations or any kind of services for the pads and stuff like that, would definitely be a big bottom up cap to apply for grants and funding for stuff. And then I know there are other different sources, and once we start showing that other groups might use it, when we get those letter of interest from Park and Rec and COA to say, yes, with this we'd be able to do outdoor events, we'd be able to have outdoor yoga for our seniors, or we could do our annual movie night here for the town, stuff like that. because it's more accessible and things like that. And, you know, we definitely have the demographics to show that there's a need for that type of accessible walking path and event type of thing, so. You know, this would actually probably assist even with some of the events with the concerts and the band, because everything's a lot more accessible for some of those who have a little problem walking here and there. And I know we park sometimes on the side, but this will allow even more access for those who have a little problem walking.
We had applied with Council on Aging last year, I think, through Tufts. They have a lot of grants to try to make areas, parks accessible for the seniors. So, I mean, we applied for one, you know, was our first attempt at it. So I think every time you do it, it's a learning experience.
Sure.
So, you know, again, there's other groups out there that are, you know, willing to then, you know, join with us to, again, make it accessible to, you know, everybody in town.
And I think part of it too is that once we get this laid out, you know, then you can figure out, okay, where do we want lighting? You know, right now they're kind of put in where we just want to make sure it covered everything. But now that if you know there's pathways here and some lighting here, you know, we could definitely, you know, do the next step and get the electrical layout kind of ironed out. And that way, every time we plan it out, we can dig it out properly and get everything kind of mapped out and
Know where it is.
know where it is and, you know, get it
Well,
done. We have some of it.
Kevin did a lot of, his electrician, a lot of that, we know where it is. You
Yeah.
know, going from light pole to light pole.
Yeah. But I think part of it would be is that, oh, and Cynthia is on the left. Cynthia, you could oh, I don't know if you're talking to us or. Do you have a question for us, Cynthia? You're on mute.
Nope, it sounds good so far.
Mr. Marinelli, do you have any questions for us so far? You're on mute as well.
No, I don't.
Okay. So I don't assume Mr. dropped off. So, you know, we really just want to see if there's any other questions or input from the public to anything there so that we can bring it to the board for approval. Any other questions from anyone in here about anything?
So on the plan, I mean, on this plan here, it's got the additional parking.
Yep.
And then it has the path from the backside of the parking lot up,
Yep,
you know, to make it accessible from both sides of the parking lot.
yep,
One of them had, like the X was actually a
Oh, the road.
connection like for the road to be like another outlet for a safety feature, that one there.
like this right here.
So I mean, I think that one has both the walking, the yellow lines for people to walk and also that extra, you know, lane for traffic flow to get out, or if an emergency, they gotta come in and get out.
I mean, I think that's definitely a lot more of a grand scheme. And I think that would be something we would have to obviously look at the costs and do that. Because I know Terry's not on here, but I'm sure everyone can tell you how much asphalt and
Well, again, I'm
that
not-
cost
I-
if we do it, but I think that is, and I'm sorry, I thought I went down this further before, but yes, this is definitely allows for greater, you know, vehicle traffic for people coming in and out.
I
And
was under
also
the impression
greater,
that was gonna be the stone dusty type material we have.
Yep.
I really don't think we need to have
no,
asphalt, you know what I mean? I think the less
Yep.
solid surface we have, you know, the better would be,
yeah,
I mean, we don't really have an issue. They don't really plow it in the winter, so it doesn't get torn up. I mean, it does need, you know, minimal maintenance to kind of drag it out and stuff, but.
well, that is something that we would have to think about in the future in terms of that, because if it is a pathway and making sure whether or not we want to have it accessible during the winter storms, it may not be the first thing to plow, it might be the last thing ever that we do.
Yeah, they don't plow it now, because I mean, nobody,
But there's no walking paths or actors, like they plow certain trails in certain towns, where you'd have to talk to DPW and figure out that if we just say, nope, they're gonna be closed in the winter, which is fine.
Oh, it's ski trips.
Yeah, right, cross-country skiing,
Snowshoe.
snowshoeing, there you go. So that is definitely something to think about. But yeah, we can definitely look at this design. In terms of the layout for the pad, is there any preference in terms of the long way or this way or the other way? I mean,
I don't think it makes any difference, because I mean, when we do the tent, I think BC tent can put that, we have a door at the front and the
Yeah.
back for the entrance and emergency exit. I think he can put it anywhere.
Yeah, you can
So I
set
don't
that
think
up
that's an
any
issue.
which way.
I point, the only reason I would say maybe the other direction is it's more visible from the street, so to speak, so you're
Yeah.
not having
Yeah,
further back in, so there's a little more visibility because it's up a little higher. That would be my only 2 cents. Because like you said, you could put this entrance on either side. The only difference is this one in this location keeps this potential tree, but it could fall down in 2 minutes once you start doing it.
take out the tent.
You know, you could take out the tent anyway. So that would be my preference. The other thing that we would probably try to look at is, I don't know if you had any discussions with the person about whether or not we can see about grading beforehand or not. Or we would talk to DPW to see if that's something before they pour the pad, if we can grade some of that out with the help of the benefactor who talked about doing the pad.
What do you
That's a-
know? What do you mean?
So as she kind of mentions, that red line, which is in on this version here, there's a high point here.
Okay,
So the idea would be to
Sort of level it.
level it off and grade it so that the pad can go anywhere in this area. Now.
Yeah.
So if we can get it graded a certain way, we can move the pad a little bit over this way. Or vice versa.
that shouldn't be a problem. I mean, they did a great job on the soccer field.
Yeah. So it's not that point, so. And then we can figure out, you know, this would be part B, because this would be, you know, what it could cost to do that and lay it out. And this could potentially be, you know, the first phase of it, in terms of getting everything done. And if we find out, yes, the extra road is not that much, we can do it at the same time, then we can figure that out.
Yeah, because this plan and the other plan are basically, the only difference is the drive-through road in the back.
So there's 2 versions of each. There's the shape of the pad, and then whether there's the walking trail,
Right, so this is the walking trail with the pad facing the street.
and the other one
whereas the other one is
shows.
the walking trail and with the pad turned. And
And
then
this
the
is the trail.
driveway with the pad turned and the driveway with the pad facing the street.
Yep, and there's the pad facing the other way.
I was thinking too, if we turn the pad crosswise rather than the lengthwise this way,
Yep,
and you put the tent up, would it be interesting to have like the front of the tent with the clear covering so that people outside can see what's going on inside? Without
oh, you could do,
actually-
yeah, you could do pretty much anything, and you know, it's not being blocked off by the fountain.
Yeah.
This way either, because it's off a little bit. I mean, you could, if you shift it over a little bit, it could be, but it would still be higher in terms of elevation than that. Let me show the. And then here's a pathway without the roadway. I think the next one should have the road,
Right.
so.
And there's pathways that go from the front of the roadway directly to the fountain, so people don't have to make that big hill. They can go, you know,
Correct, so,
north to south from the parking lot towards the fountain, and then from the fountain north again towards the other access road.
yep, so if you park here, you know, you walk over, you have your accessible path here to the fountain. You can do your loops around for walking. You know, to count your steps and all that and go through and zigzag all the way through the park and be accessible. And then walk back down this way and head back down to where you were. Where you can kind of zigzag across.
Right, I would just say for the walking paths from the parking for accessibility to make it as short and direct as possible for
Yep.
people, and also from the handicap parking. Where's the handicap parking?
Yep, so the handicap parking will be right here.
But
I
it
believe-
looks like for the events, you kind of want it at the back.
So the part is that you would have to create a separate park. So if you see what they've done here is kind of laid out the lawn parking still that they kind of have now. So this would, again, could be somewhere you remove the bollards, let people come in and park here for those who need the most issues
The
of parking.
handicap.
Right now, we put like 6 handicap spots there where folks
Yep.
can park there.
Yep.
They don't even, some of them don't get out of their car, they just,
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
can sit in their car and watch.
Listen to the cause.
Or they
Yeah.
can just walk across and stuff, so.
Yep. And then, you would put the bollards back down so you wouldn't have people coming all the way through.
But if
Um,
somebody's in a wheelchair and they want to get out, you know what I mean?
Yep, so it's, so the path itself would be accessible. And they could walk up through, and we talked about whether or not, in the grand scheme of things, you could do potentially is have cars parked along here if we wanted to. And then they could be in a car or get out and walk through. So they would have the accessible path here, and all depends on,
So that's gonna be paved too?
this would be the stone dust
No,
paddles.
the parking,
The parking,
over there, here.
that's the lawn parking. So you wouldn't, like, these would be the same ones we do now that they would save in their
Right.
car.
Right,
For the ones who want to get out and go into a wheelchair, just as they are now, we would have them park where we can get them, and they could use the path instead.
and then there's a lot of people not in a wheelchair,
Yeah.
just not so stable,
Mhm.
that, you know.
I mean, there's no, outside of putting a parking lot right here, then you're ripping out all this. It's trying to find the balance of both worlds, because you have to have one centralized
I'm
parking.
just saying from the paved parking area to like where a concert would be.
Yeah.
To try to make it as
Yeah.
direct as possible.
Yeah, I mean, the hard, this area right here is a pretty,
Like that looks like you're, well, I don't know. There was one that was.
So where those spaces are literally in the flattest part of the park, because handicap parking spaces have to be less than 2% in any direction. So that is like the one space. We could maybe move them if we want them to be more centered to the parking lot. They could move a few spaces toward the bottom of the plan. But do you see these lines that cross diagonally over the parking lot? Those are the contours that change each foot in elevation of the parking lot. So that parking lot starts to slope up. It's still slight enough to be accessible, so a wheelchair can go up it without a ramp, but it does not suit handicap parking. We'd have to really regrade and take down all of those trees that are in the middle of that existing hill if we wanted to move that handicap parking closer to the pavilions. So that's why we were trying to balance, like Greg said, that if we reconstruct the existing parking lot to really be firm, stable, slip resistant, compliant with accessible guidelines, whether it's paved or just stabilized stone dust, and then we have these walks that get you throughout the park. You could go left or right, whichever you feel is fastest to get to the pavilions, or for an event, as we widen these pathways, the existing pathways, you could have other options to park closer, stay in your car with the windows open, all of the options that they're doing now, either on the grass or on the widened pathways.
and it doesn't prevent us from having, when we have a concert like that, to even if we end up with this solution, this road here, you could have, a spot here and there, right along that line, which is
Top
right
of the
next to,
hill.
right next to the pathway here. This is an accessible route. So they could go, from here straight down to there on that pathway.
I mean, walking is good, but.
But if they're in a wheelchair, that
but,
should be,
like a college campus, people are
Yeah.
gonna take the shortest,
yeah. And outside of paving it all the way across.
No, I don't
We don't want to do that. So those are all things that we would have to look at as part of the use of the park and once we get it out. Because there could be a possibility that we could put some parking spots here and then they have this pathway they park, come along here. And they could, in a wheelchair, and plop down right here and be right next to the, right in the middle of everything. You know, because they'll be between the food court, the parking lot and the concert, which isn't a far distance. So there's some stuff, and, you know, we talked about whether or not we would want, you know, the ability for someone to park here if they really wanted to get out. We could talk about load in, load off for people with wheelchairs. So there's all different things, especially if they come in our DOA van. You know, we can have it open for that driver to drop off somebody in a wheelchair up front, and then when the van goes off, you know where they are. So all that has to be considered. It's just hard to put too many accessible pathways. Even if we put this as a parking lot here, paved, you still would have issues with the same distance from here to there than it would be, you know, from here to there. So it's,
Well, looks, I mean,
yeah,
as long as it's fairly direct.
yeah. So it's all
Yeah.
definitely to consider.
Yeah, I think that the only direct route we're not providing is really, you know, where all these red X's are. We're not allowing you to come straight across because that is literally a 3-to-1 slope, like the way dirt falls off a dump truck. So you wouldn't, it's climbable, but you know, you're not going to go up it in a wheelchair. It's mowable. But if you picture that existing parking lot now, you know, what it's like to walk up that slope and get across, it's not appropriate to put a pathway there.
Yeah, you'd have to almost have it like zigzagged all the way across to do it.
Right, so, you know, I think we talked a little bit too about, as we sat out there last time, some of the trees, you know, we were really trying to minimize taking out the trees. There's obviously a lot of grading going on, and, you know, bringing this vehicular emergency access around too, because it's wider, would affect more trees. But, you know, as the trees start to age and decline, is that another phase that you explore of like, well, the trees are gone, we're going to take them down. We could put paths zigzagging across now because you don't feel as bad about ripping that up and regrading it. You know, and if we decide that they're aging faster or declining faster than we thought, you know, maybe that's an immediate phase before, you know, sooner than we thought. But right now that seems like a long-term strategy.
And so there is a lot of other grading work too. I mean, like you mentioned here, is that this, the fountain would actually have a retaining wall to level it off. So that would be a good amount of work that we'd be doing on that. Because it does slope down. Some of our original designs actually kept the fountain the way it was, but it included a ramp or in stairs because the slope was so bad. So we figured it would be much more manageable and probably appropriate to just redo the fountain to the standards where it could meet that without having ramps and railings and steps. And so that it would be a little more probably work. But I think in the overall scheme of it would probably be a lot more user friendly.
What would you do with the memorial bricks?
We would take them out and repave it down once we put it down. It would be the same setup, would be a brick around it, and we would just reconfigure it. Once we level it up, you'd have to build a retaining wall, get it nice and level, and then kind of use the same style and base. You know, we can, you know, that's pretty standard when they do some of those type of areas. And it'll be a good opportunity then to push it again for some more. Any other questions from anybody? All right. So I know if I'm hearing correctly, this would be kind of the preferred plan, that the way this is here with the pathway and it looking this way. And then the other option would be to keep it this way, but then have just a pathway. We want to try to push to have the road in as an option. But
Eventually,
Preferably.
I would think, because that, I think that would help. I know she has in the back, you know, future expansion for parking and stuff. So I mean, if that road, if it doesn't go in now, but I mean, that would be the access to that area in the
Exactly.
future, so.
And this is something we talked about
Area for parking?
originally
Like
on one of the
behind
plans.
like behind with that area there.
So one of the original plans had this kind of looked at as possible parking for expansion of whatever else we do here, long-term. So that was just an option to get up in there and see how it would look. That was like one of our first original.
So it's possible future expansion for parking, events, sports, community gardens. So
Yeah.
just, you know. if
'Cause this
anything
area
gets
here is
built
pretty-
back there.
This part right here is somewhat flat. I mean, I don't think we had the survey. I think right over here is where it gets kind of hilly and stuff like that.
Well, you've got to sell a couple of
Yeah.
sellables.
So what I would do is I will write something up to the board, making the recommendation. I'll still put out there to see if anyone wants to submit any sort of input in the next week or so to the board as part of this project, so we can get it in front of the board and see if we can get the pads done and we can finalize the plan and move forward.
Do we ever think about putting in a bathroom rather than doing porta potties? Or
So
is
I
that
think-
just a whole nother can of worms?
That's a whole different thing, but it's not something that can't be done. They are systems now in place that I actually saw a catalog that is a separate bathroom facility that has their own built-in septic system for those things. And the difference would be is, you know, it could be housed somewhere up in this area and they could have their thing, we can lock it and only open it up during events. But you get into bathrooms and that type of stuff, you deal with it. But it is definitely something we can look into add once we get to
At some point in time, yeah.
Yeah.
I just think it's interesting because most places you go to now that have these walking paths and stuff, they have separate bathroom.
Yep. Yep.
And rather than keep renting.
Or what they could do is some of them will have their porta potties in name only. They have outdoor shells or exteriors in their plastic still, but they're wider, you walk right in. They,
Like an outhouse?
it's sort of, but they're still a porta john, but it's not a small tiny little
It's
thing.
more
It's
like
It's like the
a
handicap
portable
accessible one.
It's a handicap accessible that is more.
Like the one
something-
we had up there this weekend. You had the
Semi-
big one and then you had the little one.
They're I don't want to say semi-permanent, but there's something that are
Mostly.
up there for more than just an event. I've seen them in different bigger parks where they have them and they kind of build a shelter around them.
Yeah,
So it's,
yes, yeah.
you know,
They have one of those climate smoke solar things at Dayton Rock State Park. Yeah, there's no smell at all.
Yeah.
It's really looks great.
yeah. So they have all those type of things. So we can, we,
Revisit that.
I mean, there's definitely things that we could add once we go into, like I said, we want to make sure the lighting's there. We want to make sure that the trash, picnic tables. Once you do this type of thing, you have to have a certain amount of picnic tables and benches that are accessible. I think it's 5%, Rebecca, for the,
Yeah, I think we'd have to double check. I tend to do at least one of everything we put
of
out.
every- yeah. But now that we have this accessible path, we could put benches pretty much anywhere around there. And it'd be a lot easier to do. Versus,
And one thing to note too, Greg, sorry to interrupt, is like where I'm showing the yellow right up next to the gray, that's really just kind of giving you more level area. You wouldn't necessarily need to do all of that in like the stone dust or the pavement. You know, but it would give you more space to have your benches there, say, or, you know, picnic tables or something. Because you really just need if it's the emergency access, you just need the 18 feet width for the fire lane and then the 5-foot clear space for walking. So, you know, we might have some flexibility in the layouts as well.
all right. Well, thank you, Rebecca. Any other questions or comments? All right.
From critical path type thing, well, two things. One, if you go for a stick grant or whatever, they're gonna want to know about maintenance.
Yep.
So you do a bathroom, you think who's gonna clean it? right?
Yep.
Got that issue over at it's Fagan right now.
Mhm.
So that's one thing I want to know is maintenance commitment And then the other thing is, if you work backwards, I think the park grant that Inchville got is due in May, I think.
Yep.
So you want to have plans and any preparation you need done in February.
Yep.
So you're ready
Yeah.
to submit.
We'll have everything ready for you, Bill.
Good.
AKA
I'm glad it's.
AKA
instead of
grant
Bill
writer.
have everything ready for you.
Grant writer extraordinaire.
So, and the other piece of that is, I think there's a 40% match on that. But I think in-kind can be part of it. So some of these little projects, you might, I don't want to hold up on anything up there, but you might want to think of that in your schedule. It counts as in-kind.
Yeah. I mean, definitely want to
What's
make
that,
sure.
$1 million project?
Yeah.
100,000?
Yeah.
Rebecca, you got an estimate on it? Of any top of
We
your
haven't
head?
done that yet.
No, I don't, sorry.
But we can talk to Mike and because he has the paving contract and see what that might cost if we asphalted or whatnot, or see
Well, you're gonna have stormwater issues, right, with.
if we paved it. That was the
Pavement.
reason why we didn't want to pave it either.
Right.
We talked about stone dust as being a possibility, and then you can do cobblestones in between there to lay it out so that your parking spaces are kind of marked out. Because technically, so we don't have to paint, yeah, I don't have to paint the grass. And technically, we don't have to worry about the painting the actual spot because the handicap spots are illegal if you have the signs in. So that kind of helps with that.
You need one.
The only bad spot is
That one, so you need.
going up the hill to the top of the drive. I mean, that washes out 2 or 3 times a year, but I mean, I don't know.
Well, we haven't put stone dust on it in so many years too, so we would put it down and compact it, so hopefully, like you said,
Yeah.
pitch it the proper way and.
But I don't know, like I said, I don't know if that elevation to top's gonna change a little bit, so if that changes a little, that's gonna, make that. It's not gonna solve it, but it probably wouldn't wash out as much, but I mean.
And we have an engineer look at it to make sure that that type of stuff won't happen.
Yeah, no, Brian and the guys, they, anytime it washes out, they're up there smoothing it out, so there's no ruts for somebody to
Yeah,
twist an ankle, so.
I think having the grades that Rebecca's setting up really, that. Us having that infill room helps us restore and keep up with some of that stuff too.
Yeah, and we've been having good luck with, I don't know if your DPW is using this at all, but there's a stabilizer, like an organic stuff that can be mixed in with the stone dust, and it really helps it bind together and it makes it feel like an impervious pavement. But like you really have to kick at it to get any little flakes to come off. But then it sets up really quickly. The contractors I've been working with have loved it because they said it sets up a lot faster than regular or the not organic stabilizer. But I know the state's DCR has been using it for their paths a lot. So that's where we got the original spec. And we used it, we just used it in Stoughton on a playground expansion there. Contractor loved it.
Which one?
we can get the information.
Which playground? I can send you it's actually called organic-lock.
Okay.
So organic lock.
Anyone else understand?
Yeah, we can take a look at it and see what it looks like. All right, so I don't think there's no other questions, so I'll work something up to send to the board and we'll try to get this so we can get those pads in and
That'd be good.
sooner rather than later. Thanks, everyone. I
Yeah.
appreciate the
Thank you.
association for working and going through with this. I know this will be a great project for the town to move forward and have multiple events there. So thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks, Rebecca. Thanks, Mr. Marinelli. We'll talk soon, guys. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. That was nice.